There's always going to be obstacles, and it's how do you get around the obstacle? And how do you make it being a solution thinker rather than a reactive thinker? So I like to surround myself with people better than me who are solution thinkers.
Put that coffee down.
Creators are leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here.
Helen, we're both in sales. Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Well, hello there, friends. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Bradley Hartman, and on this show, we bring you ideas and insights from construction leaders across the construction industry every single week to help you lead more effectively. This episode is brought to you by the Simple Sales Pipeline. The promise here is simple. If you take a salesperson who has no idea what the value of his pipeline is, his existing accounts, and their prospects, with some basic probabilities applied to them because sales cycles, well, there's a certain level of uncertainty. We can organize and value any salesperson's pipeline in under 30 minutes. That's the promise. You can learn more at thesimpleSalesPipeline.com. Do not fly blind any longer into this economic uncertainty. Again, the Simple Sales Pipeline. Now, back in episode 232, I found myself in Arizona at a conference led by FEI Group. Now, the FEI Group, as you know, is the nation's largest and finest, that's right, the finest, network of interior and exterior finish contractors and interior finish showrooms. That's who they are. We are at their convention, and I had the privilege, the joy of sitting down with Mr. Dan Butterfield of Dow Tile, as well as Mr. Steve Chesin of Carpets and More. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds amazing. Should I go back and listen to episode 232? Yeah, you should. Go ahead and do that right now. We'll wait. Actually, that's not true. We're not going to wait. I'm going to continue on. You can then listen to this one as well. While we were sitting there talking to Mr. Steve Chesin, he commented somewhat casually that his family was from Minnesota, were in the bar and restaurant business, and then purchased a casino in Las Vegas that led to all sorts of hijinks with some colorful characters out there. And I said, the next time I go to Vegas, Steve, I'm going to look you up and I want to talk about this in more detail. I want to hear more of the story. And we did. And that's what you're going to hear today was my conversation, digging deeper into his background and how he has grown Carpets and More based in Las Vegas, America's playground. Now, as you will hear, Steve is himself a colorful character. He's a lot of fun to talk to. And we talk about a whole host of issues. We talk about workforce development. We talk about leadership and nonprofit organization. We talk about individual coaching for your own team and so much more. You're going to enjoy this. You, my friend, are in for a treat. Please enjoy my conversation with Mr. Steve Chesin of Carpets and More in Las Vegas. As always, thank you for listening. Mr. Steve Chesin, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Last time we spoke, we were together with the FEI Group. We were in Arizona, and we got done, and you had shared, I think, when we were recording and not, you shared a couple stories, and I said, all right, man, next time I'm in Vegas, I'm going to look you up, and we're going to do a round two. And you're like, yeah, okay. And then some time went, and then here we are. This is my first time coming, and I'm excited to be back with you, so thanks for making time.
Welcome to Vegas.
Well, it's great to be here. It's great to be alive. We're going to come back to that in a minute. So the thing that caught me off guard is most folks, I would imagine, in Vegas are transplants from somewhere. And when I heard your story that you're from Minneapolis and how you ended up out here, and then your parents were involved in a casino, and then you started a business at 18. I'm like, hold on, there's too many stories flying around here. We're going to have to go through this. So I would like to kind of take us back. Tell me about your family. Tell me maybe a little about your siblings, what your parents and your family was doing in Minneapolis. I shouldn't say Minneapolis, in Minnesota, right? And how you ended up in here.
Well, my mother had multiple sclerosis, and the winters were just brutal on that disease. And The science back then wasn't as good as it is today. So the recommendation was to move to somewhere warm. And my parents were looking at, I was in high school, my parents were looking at Phoenix, Arizona, and Las Vegas, Nevada. Well, they picked Vegas. So, being from Minnesota, coming to Las Vegas as a 17-year-old, putting a kid in a candy store.
Right. And this is what year?
1977.
Okay. All right.
I'd lived in one house my whole life in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, actually St. Louis Park. And we moved to Vegas. It's unbelievable. I mean, I could say some things, but I'm going to have to say it off script. And how good it was.
I understand. So tell me about this, because you just kind of casually mentioned, like, oh, yeah, my family owned a small casino. And I'm like, whoa. Stop right there. Your family's from Minnesota. You move here. You invest in a casino. How did that happen?
Well, one is my whole family was in the bar and restaurant business.
Okay.
And, we were looking, my dad was looking for bars, with machines. And he was a pretty good operator. And they found a place on Fremont Street called Foxy Dogs. And if you look at the old movies, and right next to the Trader Joe guy, right off 4th Street and Fremont Street, was a big hot dog. And in that hot dog was a very, very small casino. And it was very cool. And that's why we moved to Las Vegas.
So you moved here. To what degree were you involved in that family business, if at all?
I wasn't.
Okay.
I was still in high school.
Okay.
And, left everything back there and came to Vegas and never left.
Yeah. Well, I remember from our previous discussion, you were kind of mentioning is how you ended up running a flooring business. You said, I was 14 years old, neighbor, started kind of sweeping floors, and then I started doing some installation, started to make a little bit of money. When did you officially get started, kind of hang out your shingle or say, this is where I'm going. This is going to be my profession?
So when we moved to Las Vegas, my mom's brother bought a piece of property right off Spring Mountain and Las Vegas Boulevard.
Okay.
And it was an apartment complex built in the 50s that was made out of aluminum. The whole thing.
The building was out of aluminum?
Everything, the walls, the ceilings. It was a government project that they tried, and he had bought it, I don't know, for like $650,000 back in early 60s.
Yeah.
And it was just an apartment complex. And then the strip started to get built up, and it's currently where the Wynn Hotel, not the Wynn Hotel, but the Mirage Hotel is.
Okay. All right.
That's where it was. The Mirage and the Treasure Island. So we were living there while they were
You're living in this aluminum building?
Yeah, while my parents' house was getting ready to, be moved in.
It occasionally gets cold. What happens when it gets really cold in Vegas in an aluminum building?
It was constructed amazing.
Really?
But the walls dented.
Okay.
It's made out of. It was a government project. It was pretty interesting.
It is. I'm fascinated by this. Okay.
So we were living there, and I was a junior in high school, and I started cleaning the pools in the project. Had an in there, sold myself, and just started cleaning the pools, make some extra money.
Okay.
And just by the way, I played high school golf, and our high school course was the Dunes golf course. So I could go play golf every day after school for free at an unbelievable course.
Yeah.
And it was amazing.
Before I forget, you had mentioned before you moved, you had, obviously being Minnesota, it's mandatory. They put you on skates and shove you outside in freezing weather doing this thing called hockey. You went to Herb Brooks's camps, and any sort of leadership lessons or anything you remember about his coaching style from being around Herb Brooks?
He was a very, very interesting guy and a motivator.
Yeah.
And, you saw what he did with the Olympic team in 1980.
I'm aware.
It was a miracle on ice.
Yeah.
Really cool. A really good guy. Learned a lot of life lessons. We would go every summer.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we moved to Vegas, and fortunately moved to Vegas, and, just played rec hockey after that.
Okay. 18, you start your first company. It is named
Steve's Floor Covering.
Got it. And how did you come up with the name?
Well, my name's Steve.
Go.
And we were going to do
on.
floor covering. So it was pretty easy.
You start with Steve's Floor Covering. And from what you've shared with me, it's you were a kid who knew that, all right, I can do a little manual labor. I can make more money. And that's probably going to give you more options in life, probably have a little bit more fun. And then you're like, all right, you move out here, you see the opportunity to start your own company. You're 18 years old. You've started your own company. Your parents, meanwhile, are running a little casino, Foxy Dogs. Tell me about that when you got started. Like, how did you go about recruiting people as an 18-year-old to start a new business?
Well, one is I had learned how to lay carpet back in Minnesota.
Right.
And, with a Midwest mentality, a little bit of a hustler, and the people were lazy out here. So just found some opportunities and actually started working with the founder of Carpet Barn.
Okay.
And worked with him installing carpet and doing carpet repairs. And then I ended up getting into the carpet cleaning business because I knew I couldn't lay carpet my whole life. Mm-hmm. So I had to figure something out. Yep. And started cleaning carpets. And then I started hiring people and just growing the business and focused on service, taking care of our customer.
And Carpet Barn was one of the first, if not the first, like franchise or chain flooring stores. Is this correct?
No, the owner who started Carpet Barn had a chain of the first chain in California.
All right.
Called Carpet Town. So he had sold out and then started Carpet Barn because he had a non-compete in California.
Running back the same playbook.
Yeah. Though he did build up to one of the largest single stores, grossing stores in America at that time.
So you guys are growing the business from there. I wasn't aware that coming up to in 2006 and 2007, you go through a buyout pre-crash. Tell me what were some of the lessons looking back on that now that all of a sudden, it's 15 years later. What were some of the lessons you learned about anything, about kind of going through that process of buying it out and then having, kind of a once a century sort of crash here?
Well, getting an opportunity like that to do a management buyout, for me, I'd never done anything like that and had to raise a lot of money to do that. It was, I put everything I had into it. We were a very large company. Within 30 months, we went from 500 employees to 100 employees, from over $100 million in revenue to under $10 million in revenue, and we're able to navigate and stay in business based on our relationships. But it was brutal. And, letting 400 people go, my friends, it's very, very difficult. And yeah, I learned a lot of lessons. And then we had to reinvent ourselves. I mean, we went from 35,000 new homes a year in Las Vegas down to under 3. So we really had to come up. We were a flooring contractor, then became a solid surface contractor, countertops, and did a fairly good job. And then our customer says, well, if you're doing my floors and you're doing my tops, you need to do my cabinets. So then we ended up getting into the cabinet business, and we became a finishing contractor because there was only 3,000 homes being built. So you got to be more important to your customers, and, we reinvented ourselves.
What did you learn about yourself through that process? Just 100 million down to 10 million. By the way, as far as I understand, generally the debt that you raised to buy the 100 million, that doesn't really go away regardless of what the economy does. So what did you learn about yourself about grinding through all that? And, how'd you have the confidence just to kind of continue to plow ahead?
Well, after losing just about everything I had, it was time to rebuild. And, I can't do anything about the past except learn from it. So it's all about moving forward, positive attitude, and working hard.
Well, you had kind of shared an anecdote. You can tell the story from whatever perspective you like, but you had talked about coaching, mentoring someone on your team, and it was really just about not tolerating negativity. How do you go about adjusting people's behavior? Because I often think when we're with with your customers or prospects, you can be positive, you can be negative. There's something in between that isn't great either. But quite frankly, we're in the construction industry. Things are hard. Things happen. However, how do we focus on the solutions, not the problems? How do you go about kind of instilling that as part of the culture?
Well, it's pretty simple in my mind. It's a buzz line called "to think is to create." You think about positivity. You think about really what you want rather than what you don't want and what's coming, right? What you believe is coming, because it will come true. Just a little buzz line. To think is to create.
To think is to create. And the idea that, hey, if I'm going to meet with Steve, and I've been waiting for this, and I said, the next time we go to Vegas, you're going to be here. I'm like, this is going to be awesome. We show up, increased likelihood, this is going to be pretty good, right?
Thank you.
But if we go in and we're like, this is going to be, we've been running around, we're tired, we drank too much last night.
And that's what's going to happen.
And then we get here and we're like low energy, right?
Yeah.
So to think is to create. Okay. Is this something you say often? Is this engraved on a piece of quartz around here somewhere? Or is this just something that you think about and then you lead the way?
Correct. I just hate negativity, and it brings things down. So I'm an optimist, not a pessimist. Can be good and bad, right?
Yes.
But it's just how I am. And, we talk, I have one goal.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah.
Number one goal. I got one goal. He's like,
I only have one goal.
Do you want to know what it is, Bradley? Yes, Steve. Yes, I do. What is it?
The goal is to enjoy every day. It's my one goal.
Okay. So obviously in business, there's some days where you got to make tough decisions. You got to lay people off. You got to whatever. How do you make sure this isn't just, some people say like a Pollyanna-ish view of the world? You can't enjoy every day because some days are, there's a grind to it. How do you frame that around? Yeah, I realize that. And dude, what you just talked about, $100 million business down to 10, laying off hundreds of people. Those aren't fun times. How does that kind of factor in kind of the ups and downs that just naturally come with life and running a business?
So there's always going to be obstacles, and it's how do you get around the obstacle? And how do you make it being a solution thinker rather than a reactive thinker? So I like to surround myself with people better than me who are solution thinkers. It's really hard to teach solution thinking. Mm-hmm. So the people that I surround myself with are really good.
Yeah. Maybe this is related somehow, but I've been just impressed with your time management. There's obviously an element there, and just the number of different leadership positions you're involved in, about people who are taking action. My guess is part of surrounding yourself with smarter people as other business owners, not necessarily just here. Obviously being involved with the FEI group, taking a leadership role there. You talked about being on Dow Tile, their board of advisors or something along those lines. You talked about starting the first trade school down here in Southwest Nevada. Is that right?
Southern Nevada.
Southern. I guess there's no really Southwest Nevada.
Yeah, it's mainly Southern.
Triangle at the bottom. Yeah,
correct.
Fair enough. Anyway, maybe tell me a little bit your perspective there, knowing that there's only so much time for Steve Chesin to enjoy every day, and traveling to these things and being involved and just getting to know other people and having other industry-wide agendas takes up time. How do you kind of manage all that?
So one is work comes first, but balance is very important, whether it be—
Work comes first over what? Family?
No.
Okay.
As far as my work life,
yeah,
it's work-life balance.
Yep.
Which means, my kids are grown.
Okay.
So they're very self-sufficient on their own. They really don't need my help.
You casually mentioned your son has got a PhD from MIT. I'm like, oh man. And you quickly, your rejoinder was what?
That his mother was really smart.
I'm like, that's next level right there. So the kids are out of the house. Okay.
Kids are out of the house, and I have 3 grandkids. The latest one, Kason, was born last Friday evening.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you. So now I have 3 grandkids, and my kids are very successful and very happy. So
it allows you to kind of dive in. Do you ever struggle at all with understanding that to grow your own business might require more attention with an individual or a different team or spending more time with customers, and yet— right. And then maybe segue into this specifically about, I cannot imagine setting up Southern Nevada's first trade school, number one, especially when there's such a dearth of talent in our industry, and it's only going to get worse as the demography in our country continues to have the baby boomers kind of move on to other things. How do you manage that when you know that there's probably not enough of you to go around on the public things versus, or even, how much time you can spend here as well?
Well, you bring that up. I sit on a board of directors for the Southern Nevada Subcontractors Association.
Okay.
And we have 17 very strong board members who own companies in different trades. And we are working with Clark County to build the first trade school in Southern Nevada. We're licensed, and we're taking over a church and rebuilding it. That will be a trade school. And we've already hired a principal.
How big's the church?
It's about 35,000 square feet.
Okay.
And it's on a very nice lot.
Okay.
So it's going to be really cool. We're about a year away from opening.
Okay.
And, we're getting donations. We've got support from local government, and we're excited about it.
You seem like a man who's confident in his ability to sell ideas and visions and things like that. And I think, name me one market in the country where workforce development is not a primary issue we're dealing with. You guys have been successfully able to do something about that. How did you go about doing that? And how did you kind of sell that vision to get to the point that you can say is we're 12 months away from actually doing what we planned to do, when I can't imagine it's been easy?
So they did build one in Northern Nevada. It's called ACE, and we're modeling our school after ACE.
Okay.
And actually our principal was just up there for 6 months learning how they do their business. And, we've raised a lot of money, whether it be private and or through the government.
What's been successful at raising money? I've got a couple of friends who are kind of diversifying their kind of construction business and are thinking about it for the first time when they've kind of bootstrapped it and been really successful. And then they're starting to think about, hey, what can we do with other people's money? And there's a couple different forms that takes, but what have you learned about successfully raising money?
It's really all about being sincere and telling a good story and getting people to buy in. Then they write checks. It's really that easy.
How do you know when you, and if I ask this question, I think it's a bad question. And your answer will be, well, if I say, hey, how do you know if it's not a good story? You're like, well, if you don't get the check,
exactly. Need to change your story.
All right, Steve, I will reframe this. 2015, took your company public, NASDAQ. I'm sure there's a road show. You had to tell a story there. What was the story there that obviously got people to buy into it?
So my partner, who had purchased a public shell, went out and started acquiring companies.
Okay.
Because they had a lot of NOLs, which is a tax loss carry forward. And he had purchased a company, a 4,000 employee company.
Okay. Yep.
And that was doing quite well on the East Coast. And I had called him and said, are you interested in going to business with me? And he said, yeah, I'll be in town next week. And came to town, met in his suite, pitched my story, and timing was right. Story must have been good.
What was the story? What was the elements of the story?
Elements of the story is I got an opportunity to buy the company back, and you want to play with me.
Okay.
And here's where we're at. He says, call the CEO, who he knew, and set up a meeting next week.
Okay.
And we'll get the deal done. Deal got done. Put us into his public shell, which did not uplist on NASDAQ for about 2 years. It was traded by pink sheets.
Okay.
And got to go ring the closing bell on Wall Street.
It
was kind of fun.
Yeah.
Kind of fun. Yes.
Yeah. Talk to me. You've got 4 daughters and a son. Are any of them interested in the business?
Well, one of my daughters worked for us as a receptionist, then became a designer who recently went to work for one of my customers at their request.
All right.
So
that's flattering. And I'm sure there's some pros and cons, but it sounds like a pretty solid win-win.
And another one of my daughters worked for me in marketing until she went off and started her own marketing business. Who's one who just had Chesin. Last Friday.
Got it. Okay. If we were talking to them, knowing their father, working in the business or working alongside you, has your leadership style changed over the years? And if so, how?
Well, I've definitely matured, and I definitely learned how to balance my life, not to take things so seriously.
How'd that happen?
Experience, getting kicked in the balls enough.
Yeah. Sure. Got it.
And, you tweak.
I wanted to ask you, you had mentioned for the past several years, as we were kind of talking about the trade school, we're talking about talent, and you were saying as you were continuing to look for talent, you are now seeing more and more talented people available on the market. Why do you think that is, and how are you guys taking advantage of that?
Well, based on COVID and people not being able to stay home and make more money than they could coming to work, the talent pool shrunk quite significantly. And I mean, we would hire people just because they had a heartbeat, because there just wasn't people available. Until just recently, I've been getting better resumes than I've seen in the last 5 years of quality people. And, it's time to get rid of your B minus, C, and D players and replace them with A players.
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking for. Is we're going to keep upgrading. Not that I want to get rid of people, but I want to get rid of the low performers.
Yeah. Does that change at all as you are obviously just announced today? There's another interest rate nudge north. Questions of, are we in a recession right now? Does it feel like one? Obviously real close to us here on the West Coast. Obviously every tech firm is just, I believe, just seeing an opportunity to say, well, everybody else is laying people off. Why don't we do that as well? And yet in construction, generally, we still do not have nearly enough talent for the short term, let alone the longer term. How do you kind of balance those of what, obviously these unknown economic circumstances are, and continuing to hire, to swap out talent, to kind of build a team?
Well, the goal is to reduce your overhead, to be able to weather the storm so you continue to cash flow. And, that's a double-edged sword, because when it picks up, you don't have that talent you let go.
Yes, there's a lag.
So it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
And from the first downturn, I waited way too long because I'm an optimist.
To shed. Talent. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, it wasn't good. And I won't do that again, because that hurt me personally, because I held on to people too long that I really didn't need, because I felt bad.
So are there any sort of economic indicators you look for, or is it talking to other people in your orbit? Like, how do you get the feel for, because there's no green light that says, oh, here it is, time for a reduction in force, which is one of my favorite layoff euphemisms. That's not out there, right? So how do you kind of gauge that?
So a few different ways. One is I watch sales, new housing sales. Last 6 months, we've went from 300 sales a week, 300 plus sales a week, down to under 100 sales a week. So we have a slowdown coming in our new home construction. Well, what do? Right? You look at what are other revenue streams, such as multifamily, such as retail. So we focus on that. Also, I'm part of a CEO group that sit with, 15 different business owners in different industries, and we talk about life and business. And, we talk about our best practices and who's doing what. So you're around, 16, 17 other very influential people who see things differently. And that helps.
Yeah. All right, Steve, I'm watching the time, and I appreciate you letting us kind of crash in here with relatively little notice here. This being the Construction Leadership Podcast, based on your career in construction, building relationships in two very different climates, both literally and figuratively. Do you have one kind of overriding business kind of leadership philosophy that has really helped you in your career?
Well, thanks for asking that question. For me, it's about playing win-win, whether it be with my customer, with my employees, with my family. If you can create a win-win situation, everybody wins.
Yep. And obviously that is not the mantra of Vegas. I'm pretty sure Eric last night went and gambled a little bit. It was not win-win. It was, you enjoyed your time, but Yeah, not right.
But you could have won.
You could have won. You could have, but you didn't. Can you tell me about like a recent example that you say here? I'll give you an example. I went in, maybe it's with an employee, maybe it's with a customer, maybe it's with a bank, in a way that you said, hey, I've got a couple different ways that I could approach this. There's some alternatives. I could take this tact. I chose to do this as a win-win, and this is what happened. Because I think a lot of times people will hear win-win, or they'll read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. They're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But they struggle to, in some cases, I think, overcome their personal self-interest, and they end up kind of doing where it's kind of win-win, but really better for me than it is for you, or vice versa. So I don't know, anything come to mind where you could say, here's an example, Bradley, that happened recently?
So it's a lot in sales.
Yeah.
And it's a lot to get that feeling that everybody wins, or that both sides win.
Yeah.
And as long as that's the perception,
right,
it works. And how do you do that? I mean, that's just something I've learned years of dealing with people. And if I can create that win-win situation, you're going to get the next deal, and then the next deal.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've ever done this. One thing that I often think about, I've noticed people do it with me, and trying to kind of deconstruct what happened. But obviously in a negotiation, especially a protracted one, there's lots of emotions, there's lots of feelings, there's all this sound. I'm like, dude, am I giving away too much? And I've found the skilled negotiators will start helping you articulate the story that you will then tell your team about how we won and how this was successful. And then, because sometimes it's like, oh, I know why we're doing this deal, but that's different than walking out of that room and that kind of internal marketing of telling your team, we're done, Steve and I, we closed, and here's what's in it for us. But if you can help me articulate that to my team, then we know we actually have a story that can pass. So I don't know if that ever comes to mind. And my guess is part of this is just experience, and you're natural at it. You're comfortable selling. But I too often see this win-win phrase is just, I don't know, something people say, and I'm not sure how deeply they've really thought about it.
Well, I think about it a lot, and it's a give and take, and how, again, do you create the balance that everybody wins? Mm-hmm. It's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, too, and I can imagine it's when that doesn't happen and you see or feel relationships that deteriorate. Oftentimes, it's a small enough community out here, anywhere in our industry, where you can say, whatever happened in the last deal, I don't feel, over time, our relationship has strengthened. All right, how do I double down? How do I take a different tact? How do I really make sure they really value that? Because again, as you know, it's all relationships. That's the whole.
Well, and then you hear customers for life, right? And that buzz line, can that be true? Can that really happen? And when like we're selling to a home builder, mm-hmm. they have a home buyer, right? The home buyer is not your customer. The home builder is. That's who's paying you. So how do you translate that to the customer to win that customer over? By doing a great job, and then one-to-one marketing to that customer who bought the house becomes your customer. Do a great job with them, and they go to their neighbor, their friends, their family, and that's the best way to grow your business, in my opinion.
Yeah. Not easy, but if you have that fanaticism and, believe that, hey, every problem has a solution and there's an opportunity to grow, you can have fun doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Awesome. Well, hey, I want to thank you again for making time. This is I always enjoyed chatting with you, and I just want to say thank you for your time.
Appreciate it, and thanks for coming to Vegas.
All right then, friend, how did that go? Hopefully you enjoyed my conversation with Mr. Steve Chesin nearly as much as I enjoyed meeting with him at his office off the strip there in Vegas. If you did get value from this, there's a couple things you can do. Number one, feel free to share it with your network. You can obviously do that listening to this podcast. So share that link. Super easy to do from whatever app you're listening to right now. And that's right. And there's another feature. We brought the video equipment there. Eric, the producer, set it up, and we recorded this conversation in video that is available on YouTube. It's where all the cool kids are going. That's what I'm being told. All right, you can look up Bradley Hartman and Co., where we are filming a lot more video to make it easier for you to share these insights so we can bring the construction community closer together. When done, if I may, if I'm in a position to ask for a small favor, please rate and review us. That means more to us than you know as we strive to grow our audience. This episode is brought to you by the Simple Sales Pipeline. You can organize and value any reps pipeline into the future to make sure that your sales will continue to grow regardless of the economic conditions in under 30 minutes or less. How can you do that? By using the Simple Sales Pipeline. Where can you find it? We made that easy for you. TheSimpleSalesPipeline.com. All right, friends, that's all I've got. We're going to close out with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.